The friendship between Juniper and Arlo was a thing of quiet certainty, as steady and familiar as the old oak tree that stood at the edge of the meadow behind their neighborhood. Its branches were a sprawling map of their childhood, each gnarled limb and knotty protrusion holding a memory. They had claimed this spot years ago, declaring it their official meeting place, and the earth beneath it was worn soft by their countless afternoons spent there. For Juniper, the world always seemed to make more sense when viewed from the comfortable perch of the oak's lowest branch, with Arlo sitting beside her. She was a girl who found comfort in details, her mind always capturing the world in shades and lines, her fingers often itching to draw the way the light filtered through the leaves. Arlo was her perfect contrast. Where she was quiet observation, he was calm action. He knew her silences were full of thought, and he never felt the need to break them. Their routine was a comfortable rhythm built over years. Every day after the final school bell rang, they would meet at their lockers, a silent agreement passing between them. The walk home was a slow meander, a time for unpacking the day's events. Juniper would talk about the story she was reading or the sketch she was working on, her hands moving through the air as she described it. Arlo would listen, his attention complete, occasionally pointing out a bird or a strangely shaped cloud, his observations of the world around them simple and grounded. He carried her heavy art portfolio without her ever having to ask, his shoulders straining slightly under the weight of her dreams. They would eventually find their way to the oak tree, dropping their backpacks at its roots like shedding heavy skins. They would sit for hours, sometimes talking about everything, sometimes talking about nothing, the space between them always easy and warm. Lately, however, Juniper had begun to notice a subtle shift in the air around Arlo. It wasn't anything he said or did, but rather a physical change that was slowly rewriting the boy she knew. His voice, which once cracked with predictable randomness, had settled into a deeper, more resonant tone. When he laughed, which was often around her, the sound seemed to vibrate in the space between them. The lanky, arms and legs boy who used to race her to the tree was being replaced by someone taller, with broader shoulders and a new, quiet solidity to his presence. Juniper found her artist's eye tracing the new lines of him, the way his hands seemed stronger, the way he moved with a newfound grace. It was confusing, this new awareness of her best friend's body, and she would quickly shake her head, burying the thought as deep as the oak's roots. One particularly bright afternoon, the shift became impossible to ignore. They were taking their usual shortcut home through the park, Juniper balancing her large sketchbook and a new set of charcoal pencils. A group of older boys, ones they usually avoided, were loitering near the chain-link fence. As Juniper and Arlo passed, one of them nudged his friend and made a loud comment about Juniper's baby drawings. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest, a flush of embarrassment and fear heating her cheeks. She instinctively stepped closer to Arlo, his familiar presence her first line of defense. The boys, encouraged by her reaction, circled closer, their teasing turning more pointed. One reached out, not to hurt, but to snatch the sketchbook from her hands. Before Juniper could even gasp, Arlo moved. He didn't step in front of her dramatically. Instead, he simply shifted his weight, placing himself solidly between Juniper and the boy. "Leave her alone," he said. But the words were not the high, strained plea of a nervous boy. They were low, firm, and carried a weight of authority that seemed to still the very air. The new depth of his voice was a command. The boy who had reached for the sketchbook paused, his hand hanging in the air, and he looked at Arlo properly for the first time. He wasn't looking at a scrawny kid anymore, he was looking at a young man whose calm stance promised he would not back down. The teasing smiles faded from the other boys' faces. After a tense moment, the leader muttered something and jerked his head, leading his friends away, their bravado deflated. The park was quiet again, save for the sound of their breathing. Arlo turned to Juniper, his fierce expression melting away in an instant, replaced by a concern so deep and familiar it made her heart ache. "Are you okay, Junie?" he asked, his voice soft again, but the rich, low timbre of it was now a permanent part of him. His hand came up and rested gently on her shoulder, a touch that had always meant comfort and safety. But this time, it felt different. A jolt, warm and electric, shot straight from his fingertips through the fabric of her shirt and down her spine. She looked up at him, truly looked at him, and saw the faint worry lines between his eyebrows, the determined set of his jaw, and the protective light in his eyes that was meant only for her. The fluttery feeling in her stomach erupted into a full storm. This was not just her best friend Arlo. This was someone new, someone strong, someone who made her feel a confusing and wonderful mix of safe and thrillingly nervous all at once. He picked up her fallen charcoal pencils, his movements careful, and handed them back to her. "Let's get out of here," he said softly. She just nodded, her voice lost somewhere in the whirlwind of her new feelings. The walk to the oak tree was silent, but the silence was now filled with 1,000 unspoken questions. She replayed the moment in her mind over and over, the firm command in his voice, the solid wall of his back as he shielded her, the gentle touch that now felt like a brand on her skin. Under the familiar branches of their tree, the dynamic had irrevocably changed. She sat a little further away from him than usual, not out of fear, but out of a need to process the strange, warm desire to be closer to him than she ever had before. She watched as he leaned against the trunk, looking out at the meadow, and she knew with a terrifying certainty that nothing between them would ever be simple again. The boy she trusted with all her secrets had somehow, without trying, unlocked a door in her heart she never even knew was there. The world had taken on a strange new texture for Juniper since the incident in the park. It felt like someone had adjusted the lens through which she viewed her life, making everything both startlingly clear and uncomfortably sharp. The familiar school hallways seemed longer, the noise of slamming lockers more distant, as if she were moving through a dream where only one person remained in focus, Arlo. Her best friend now felt like a fascinating stranger she needed to understand all over again. She found herself studying him with an artist's intensity, noticing details that had once blended into the comfortable background of their friendship, the way he ran a hand through his dark hair when thinking, the specific curve of his smile when he saw her, the new confidence in his walk through crowded spaces. This new awareness came with a nervous flutter that complicated their simplest interactions. Their effortless rhythm now featured hesitant pauses and quickly averted glances. Where she used to casually loop her arm through his on walks home, she now kept her hands safely tucked in her jacket pockets, afraid that even accidental contact might send electric sparks through her system and betray her confusion. She filled silences with chatter about homework or the weather, anything to avoid the heavy, unspoken words between them. She was building an invisible wall, brick by careful brick, terrified that if she let her guard down, he would see the tumultuous feelings swirling inside her and their friendship would shatter. Arlo felt the distance like a sudden chill in a once warm room. He noticed how Juniper's laughter sometimes seemed forced, how her eyes that once met his with open honesty now looked at his shoulders or hands or somewhere past him. He replayed their recent interactions, searching for some misstep that might have caused this rift. The easy comfort that had been their foundation was cracking, and he felt a profound sense of loss growing in his stomach. He missed her playful shoves, the silly jokes she'd whisper during boring lessons, the uncomplicated warmth of her presence. He worried his actions in the park had made her see him as aggressive or frightening. At the same time, his own feelings were quietly transforming. He had always known Juniper was special, but now he saw a beauty that went beyond familiar friendship. It was in the way she bit her lip while drawing, a strand of hair falling across her face. In the gentle sound of her voice when she talked about stories that moved her, and the kindness she showed everyone from lost freshmen to stray cats. He realized with a jolt that the protective surge he'd felt wasn't just about defending a friend, it was something fiercer, more personal. He wanted to be the one she smiled at, the one she trusted with her heart, not just her secrets. The thought of losing what they had became unbearable. The upcoming school dance magnified all their unspoken tensions. For Juniper, it became a symbol of everything that had changed. She watched other girls get asked, their faces lighting up with excitement, while a hopeful part of her dreamed Arlo would ask her. She imagined getting ready, meeting him at her door, walking into the gymnasium not as friends but as a couple. Yet her cautious side remained terrified. What if he asked out of friendship? What if he didn't ask at all? What if she asked him and he said no, making their awkwardness permanent? Arlo wrestled with the same dilemma. The dance dominated everyone's conversations, reminding him he wanted to go with Juniper and no one else. He practiced the question constantly, but the stakes felt impossibly high. Asking would make his complicated feelings obvious, and if she didn't feel the same way, it might create a permanent silence between them. He'd rather have her as a best friend than not at all. When he saw her lost in thought, he misinterpreted it as her wishing someone else would ask her, filling him with a strange, hollow ache. The breaking point came during a quiet study session in the school library. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. They sat across from each other at a heavy wooden table, textbooks between them like a barrier. The silence had become thick and uncomfortable. Juniper stared at the same history page without reading, her pencil unmoving. Arlo watched her, his own book forgotten, until his overflowing worry finally found voice. "Juniper," he said softly, the sound echoing in the quiet space between them. She looked up, startled. "Did I do something wrong? You've been different. If it's something I did, I'm sorry." Juniper's heart hammered against her ribs. This was her moment to either retreat behind her wall or take a chance. Seeing the sincere worry in his eyes, the same eyes that had held such fierce protection for her, her defenses crumbled. "No," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong, Arlo. It's me. I've just been confused." "Confused about what?" He pressed gently, leaning forward. She took a shaky breath. About us. About how I feel." The admission hung in the air, fragile and honest. Arlo's heart skipped a beat. Her words gave him courage he didn't know he possessed. Slowly, carefully, he reached across the table, bypassing the books, and placed his hand palm up between them. It was an invitation, a question, a leap of faith. Juniper looked from his hand to his face, seeing the hope and vulnerability that mirrored her own heart. After a moment that felt like eternity, she slid her hand into his. The contact was immediate and profound. His warm, strong hand enveloping hers felt more intimate than any hug they'd ever shared. The confusing whirlwind inside her stilled, coalescing into crystal-clear certainty. This was right. He was right. Feeling her trust, Arlo took the final leap. His thumb gently stroked her hand as he looked into her eyes, his voice barely a whisper but filled with newfound resolve. "Juniper, the school dance, would you go with me? Not as my best friend." He paused, letting the significance hang in the air. "But as my date." The world seemed to stop. The library, the other students, the dust motes, everything faded away. The deep desire he'd unlocked in her bloomed fully in her chest, warm and exhilarating. A radiant smile broke across her face, the first genuine, unguarded smile she'd given him in what felt like forever. The fluttering in her stomach transformed from nervousness to pure, undiluted joy. "Yes, Arlo," she said, her voice firm and clear. "I will go to the dance with you. As your date." In the quiet library, holding hands across homework and textbooks, the wall between them dissolved completely. Their friendship remained, strong and sturdy, but something new and beautiful had begun growing upon it, reaching eagerly for the sun. The week before the dance unfolded in a blissful haze for Juniper and Arlo. The tension that had once stretched between them had transformed into something sweet and electric. Their hesitant glances became long, smiling looks filled with unspoken understanding. The careful distance Juniper had maintained vanished, replaced by a magnetic pull that drew them constantly together. When they walked to school, his shoulder would gently brush against hers, sending thrills through them both. When they met at their lockers, his hand would find hers for a brief, squeezing moment, a silent confirmation that their new relationship was real and wonderful. They still talked about homework and stories, but now their conversations were peppered with soft, secret smiles that made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. The evening of the dance arrived, and for Juniper, getting ready felt like preparing for the most important moment of her life. The soft fabric of her blue dress felt different against her skin than any other clothing she'd ever worn. Looking at her reflection, she didn't just see a girl, she saw someone on the verge of something beautiful. When the doorbell rang, her heart leaped. Walking downstairs, she found Arlo standing in the doorway holding wildflowers, wearing a button-down shirt and tie. He looked so handsome and grown up that it took her breath away. His eyes widened with pure, unguarded admiration that made her feel more beautiful than any compliment ever could. "You look amazing, Juniper," he said, his voice full of awe. Her parents took pictures, but they existed in their own bubble, aware only of each other. The school gymnasium had been transformed into a magical space. Strings of lights twinkled from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over everything, while music pulsed through the floor in rhythm with their racing hearts. They stood near the dance floor for a while, watching classmates move and laugh in the familiar yet new atmosphere. When a slow song began, its gentle melody weaving through the air, Arlo turned to her with a question in his eyes. She answered with a smile, placing her hand in his. As he led her onto the floor, placing one hand on her waist while holding her other hand, the rest of the world melted away. The crowd's chatter, other couples, flashing lights, all became a distant backdrop to the solid feel of his hand on her back, the warmth of his body close to hers, and the scent of his familiar soap. They moved together without practiced steps, finding a natural rhythm that belonged only to them. Their slow, gentle sway became a conversation without words. Juniper rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart through his shirt. It felt like coming home to a place she never knew existed. She memorized the feeling of his chin resting lightly on her hair, the secure circle of his arms, the complete rightness of being held by him. "This is perfect," he murmured near her ear, and she simply nodded, knowing no words could capture her happiness. They danced until the slow song ended, then stayed on the edge of the crowd, talking and laughing, their hands finding each other again and again as if drawn by invisible force. When the dance ended and lights came up, they shared an unspoken agreement: they weren't ready for the magic to end. "Let's go to the tree," Arlo suggested, and Juniper instantly nodded. The cool night air felt fresh against their skin as they walked hand in hand, their footsteps quiet on the pavement. The full moon bathed the world in silvery light, while stars scattered across the velvet sky like glittering diamonds. Their oak tree stood as always, a silent guardian of their history, moonlight filtering through its leaves to create patterns of light and shadow on the grass below. Sitting at its base with their backs against the familiar bark, they looked up at the stars, listening to leaves rustle in the night breeze. The evening's events hung beautifully between them. Arlo turned, and in the moonlight, her face looked more beautiful than ever. He took both her hands, his touch firm and sure. "Juniper," he began, his voice quiet but intense. "What I said at the library was true, but only a small part. The bigger truth is I've been in love with you for a long time. I just didn't have the words." His eyes searched hers. "You're my best friend, the person I tell everything to. But you're also the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last before I sleep. You're why I notice pretty skies, because I know you'd want to draw them." Tears of pure joy welled in Juniper's eyes as his words healed her last traces of confusion and fear, confirming every secret hope she'd cherished. She squeezed his hands, her voice soft but unwavering. "Arlo, when you stood up for me in the park, you unlocked a part of my heart I didn't know was locked. These new feelings, this deep desire to be near you, to be more than friends, was scary but the most real thing I've ever felt. You were my best friend, and you still are. But now you're also the boy I love. My heart was just waiting to realize it was you all along." In the moonlit intimacy under their tree, Arlo leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. But Juniper met him halfway. Their first kiss wasn't dramatic, but soft, gentle, and perfect, a promise tasting of the future yet filled with echoes of their shared past, blending innocent friendship with the deep, mature love now blooming between them. When they parted, they rested foreheads together, breathing in the moment, committing every second to memory. They sat talking in hushed tones about dreams, fears, and the wonderful, exciting future stretching before them, a path they would walk together. Their childhood best friend promise had been sealed with a kiss, evolving into the first, sacred promise of forever. If this story of first love touched your heart, subscribe for more beautiful romances that capture the magic of falling in love. Your next favorite story awaits.